Now I will just introduce our speaker, that is Gaia Boniardi. Gaia is a PhD from the 36th cycle, right? And she's enrolled in the IAI program, so Environmental Infrastructure Engineering program. She is working with Professor Canziani and Professor Turolla, and her research is focused on phosphorus, and especially today she will talk about how and why should we recover phosphorus from sewage systems. So without further ado, I just leave the floor to Gaia, so the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chiara. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. The topic of the PhD, as Chiara said, is phosphorus recovery about sewage sludge, and in particular about sewage sludge ash. The presentation is structured as follows. I give you some information about phosphorus, phosphate rocks, and sewage sludge. Then I will show you the main task of my PhD research. Then I will focus on the phosphorus recovery from the ash, and in particular, I will give you some information about the approach we use, which is called design of experiment. I will also show you some decontamination strategy we tested, which is the use of nano sponges to decrease the heavy metals contamination. And at the end, I will come to conclusions. I will summarize the key points of the research, and I will give you also some information about the next steps. Let's start with phosphorus. Why is it important to recover phosphorus? Phosphorus is an essential element for all living organisms. It is present in our cells, in the DNA, in the RNA, and it has no substitute in the world. It is one of the 3 macronutrients used by plants together with nitrogen and potassium. It is also essential for the food production because the phosphorus-based fertilizers are very important to maintain the crop productivity. And due to excessive use of phosphorus in 2017, it entered the list of the critical raw materials. At the same time, we have the phosphate rocks, which are non-renewable resources. They are concentrated in few countries like Morocco, China, and US, and Russia. You can see a picture of a phosphate rocks located in Morocco. More than 90% of the mined phosphorus is used to produce fertilizers, while the remaining part is used to manufacture additives and industrial products such as animal feed, batteries, or detergents. Due to the rapid urbanization, the growth of population, and the spread of intensive agriculture, phosphate rocks are facing gradual scarcity. So they enter in 2014, almost 10 years ago, the list of the critical raw materials. As a result, the sustainable management of phosphorus becomes a priority. To tackle this issue, Winters et al. Proposed the 5R strategy. As we go from the first to the last strategy, we have an increasing difficulty of implementation. The first one is related to realign the phosphorus inputs, which means, for instance, remove the phosphorus in products that are not necessary, like the detergents, or at least to try to reduce the content. The second one is related to the phosphorus losses, so the idea is to try to reduce the phosphorus losses to water. The third one is recycle phosphorus in bioresource, and the fourth one is recover phosphorus in waste, which is what I'm trying to do now with the phosphorus recovery from the sewage sludge and the ash. And the last one is the most difficult one because it is related to the food chain, the phosphorus in the food chain, and it's something more personal because it's related to the choice of the dietary we have. Where does sewage sludge come from? I know that most of you knows what is sewage sludge, but let me just introduce this. So we have usually the water withdrawals, then we use the water, we consume it, and then wastewater are treated and discharged or reused. So here we have a common configuration of a wastewater treatment plant. We have the influent and we have the effluent. What comes out is the sewage sludge. We have strict regulations regarding the concentration of phosphorus in the effluent to prevent the eutrophication of the water bodies. So more than 90% of phosphorus concentrates in the sewage sludge. That's why phosphorus is a very interesting and promising source of phosphorus. We can recover phosphorus from different locations. For instance, we can recover phosphorus after the dewatering unit, which is a unit dedicated to the reduction of the water content in the sludge, or we can recover phosphorus after the incineration, or after the watering unit from the liquid fraction, so from the supernatants. The treatment and the management of sewage sludge is extremely costly operations, so more than half of the cost of a wastewater treatment plant are related to the sludge treatment. In Italy, 41% of sludge usually goes to composting, 26% to landfilling, 15% to agriculture, and the rest to other practices such as incineration. There are a lot of concerns nowadays related to the direct spread of sewage sludge in agriculture. For instance, we have some countries like Switzerland and Netherlands that banned this practice, while other countries like Austria and Germany limited the use of sludge in agriculture. In Lombardy, landfilling has been phased out, so that percentage goes to 0. And again, in Lombardy region, so Regione Lombardia, with the Piano Fanghi, we have this strategy. So the idea is to send to the agriculture the sludge that has high quality, and the other one, so the sludge that has low quality, should go to more incineration. So in this view, we will have the production of ashes, which should be contaminated with heavy metals. And the idea is to recover phosphorus from the ash direct after the production of the ash or after the storage of the ash, depending on the availability of the technology that we have. During the past decades, a lot of technologies have been developed to recover phosphorus from different points we have seen before. So in this graph, we have on the x-axis the population-specific cost, and on the y-axis the product-specific cost. You have a different bubble with a different size. I want to just show you that the red bubbles refer to the recovery of phosphorus from the ash, and the closer we are to the origin, the lower the price. So the idea is that it is more convenient to extract phosphorus from the ash because phosphorus is concentrated, so it costs less to recover it. As I said before, more than 20 technologies have been developed, both at lab and pilot scale. There is also the ash-to-phos technology, which has a plant under construction. It will be probably ready in 2 or 3 years, and this will be the first full-scale plant. However, research is still needed. The combustion process, so the mono-incineration, is not optimized. We need to optimize it in the view of phosphorus recovery because it affects the composition of the ash. We can still increase the quality of the recovered material, and we can improve the cost of the process and the environmental sustainability of the recovery. Let's move now to the 5 tasks of my PhD project. So the first task is related to the assessment of the influence of the upstream variables, which are, for instance, the type of chemical method we use at the wastewater treatment plant. So if we have a plant that uses, for instance, a chemical method to remove phosphorus, we will observe a higher concentration of aluminum and iron in the sludge than in the ash, while if we have a plant that uses biological phosphorus removal, we expect to have a lower concentration of those elements. Then another important thing to assess is the influence of the type of the technology, incineration technology we use, and the combustion process condition we use, because these, of course, affect the chemical and physical composition of the ash. The second one is related to the optimization of the phosphorus chemical extraction from the ash using the design of experiment approach. And the idea here is also to identify the key performance indicator of the process. So we have the ash, we produce the ash, we leach the phosphorus in the ash, and then we need to precipitate phosphorus from the liquid fraction. So the third task is related to the optimization of the phosphorus precipitation efficiency, precipitation process, to have at the end a product that could be applied in agriculture as fertilizers. The first task is related to the assessment of the contamination strategies to decrease the heavy metals content in the recovered material. We tested different strategies. The first one, the pre-inertization of ashes, was done in collaboration with the University of Brescia. The idea was to try to trap the heavy metals in the silica matrix of the ash in order to remove the co-extraction of heavy metals during the first phase, which was the leaching phase. Unfortunately, this strategy did not work because acid was able to break down the bonds that phosphorus made with the heavy metals, even if we did some pre-inertization. And the second strategy was we used the nanocellulose sponges developed by the Department of Chemical Engineering to decontaminate to reduce the heavy metals in the leachate, so after the first phase, which is the extraction. We use these nanostructure cellulose materials. And then the last task was done at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. And I used to extract phosphorus from different metrics. So in this, I focus on the recovery from activated sludge and hydrogen, which is a solid product of hydrothermal carbonization. And I try to extract phosphorus from the activated sludge using two methods. The fermentation, so we provide nitrogen in order to have anaerobic conditions and try to release phosphorus from the sludge. While the second one was a chemical extraction. So again, I used both acids and bases to release phosphorus in solution. Due to the limited amount of time, I will not be able to show you all the results I get from these tasks, so I will focus on task 1, 2, and 3. Before going to the results, I want to show you a simplified flow sheet of the process. So we have the ashes, the production of the ash. The phosphorus content in the ash can vary, of course, but usually it's around 6 and 9%. We have the first phase, which is the chemical extraction or the acid leaching. So we put the ashes in contact with an acidic solution, which could be, for instance, can be done by sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid. The idea is to have a pH which is acidic, very acidic, lower than 2, because this is the method we use to have a high phosphorus extraction efficiency. After this, we have a solid liquid separation unit. So we have the liquid, which is also called the leachate, which is enriched with phosphorus. And we have also the solid part, which is the acidic solid residue that accounts of around 80% of the total mass of the ash. The idea is to try to reuse this material in the cement industry as a building material. The second phase is the precipitation of phosphorus. So we dose a base to increase the pH and to precipitate phosphorus in a solid form. The remaining part, so the heavy metals present in the liquid fraction, can be precipitated and recovered as well in a solid form. Let's move to task 1. So to assess the influence of the upstream incineration variables of the incineration process, we collected different type of ashes. Within the Perform Water project, we collected ashes from a moving rate furnace, which was located at the San Giuliano Ovest wastewater treatment plant. We collected both bottom ashes, which are the 90% of the total ashes we produce, and we collect also the fly ash, which are the ashes collected after the flue gas cleaning. In this case, they refer to cyclone ash. In this project, we performed 3 different experimental campaigns, and we collected 6 different samples. Then, within the Foster project, which is an European-funded aramine coal project, we collected ashes from fluidized bed incinerators that was located in the wastewater treatment plant of Milano San Rocco. You can see here some examples of the ashes collected, and we collected another ash from the Zurigo wastewater treatment plant and incinerator. Then, when I was in Australia, because there was no incinerator, so I produced the ashes at laboratory scale. 2 types of ashes, bottom ash. So you may wonder why the ashes have a color that is red, brown, or orange, and there is only one sample that is white. The answer is that what gives the red color to the ash is the presence of iron oxide. So in those samples, the concentration of iron was very low, and only calcium hydroxide and oxides are present instead of iron oxide. So surprisingly, this type of ash were white. So the main findings of the first task are reported here. The phosphorus content in the ash varied between 5 and 10%, depending on the type of technology of incineration we used. And we observed that the lowest phosphorus content was related to the incinerator of Milano San Rocco, because they dosed calcium carbonate additives directly into the combustion chamber, which diluted somehow the phosphorus concentration in the ash. From the Perform Water project, we found out that bottom ashes were suitable to extract phosphorus because they were less contaminated compared to the fly ash, because the most volatile metals and semi-volatile metals tend to concentrate in the fine size ash, while the bottom ash, which were the majority of the ash, remained with less contamination, while phosphorus was the same, the concentration was the same in the 2 fractions, so it was more convenient to extract phosphorus from the bottom ash. While from the incineration using the fluidized bed, as I was telling you before, we found out that if we dose calcium carbonate directly in the combustion chamber to prevent the corrosion of the pipes and to control the sulfur emission, we have a dilution of the phosphorus content in the ash, and we have an increase of the pH of the ash. Indeed, in this case, the pH was around above 12, while with the other ashes it was around 7 and 8. This reflects in the higher acid consumption in the first phase, which was the extraction. And then from the muffle incineration, we observed that that white sample derived from a plant in which they removed 100% of phosphorus was removed biologically. So it is better to have a wastewater treatment plant with this type of configuration, because at the end we will have an ash whose content of iron will be lower compared to a plant in which chemical phosphorus removal is applied. Now we can move to task number 2, which was related to the optimization of the phosphorus chemical extraction. So from all the samples we collected, we selected 2 samples. The first one was the ash from Milano San Rocco, in which whose alkalinity was really high. As you can see, it's 24,500 milligrams of calcium carbonate per liter, while the second sample was the ash from the Zurigo incinerator. And we have alkalinity 1 order of magnitude lower. If we go into details about the phosphorus dissolution equations, we know that phosphorus in the ash is usually bound to calcium and iron or aluminum because they are the most element present in the ash. And to extract phosphorus from the ash, we need to provide H+. That's why we did leaching with hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid. So we have a consumption of the H+ in order to release phosphorus in form of phosphoric acid because our pH is below 2. It's below 2. Concurrent to the phosphorus dissolution, we have other acid consumption. For instance, if we have a high amount of calcium carbonate in the ash, these will consume acid, as you can see in these equations. So this means that if we want to extract phosphorus from ash which has a high content of calcium carbonate, we need to provide more H+, which means more acid, higher acid consumption. So to optimize the extraction, we use the design of experiment approach. So we selected the 3 process variables, which are the concentration of the acid, the liquid to solid ratio, and the contact time. Then we set 2 levels, and we conducted the experiment for those 2 samples of ash. So you can see that we use a central composite design approach. So we performed the experiment at laboratory scale. All tests were conducted in duplicates, and we consider both the corner points of the cube, the axial point, and the center point. So the idea was to find a regression equation. Our response is the phosphorus extraction efficiency, and the factors we consider were, again, concentration, liquid solid ratio, and time. So the idea was to find this relationship between the factors and the phosphorus extraction efficiency, and we wanted also to investigate the impacts of the different factors. So it is more important to increase the liquid to solid ratio or time, or the acid concentration. Here you can see the results for the first type of ash, the one which has a high content of calcium carbonate. So we found out that the model globally was the same for both acid, but sulfuric acid was 5% less effective than hydrochloric acid. The most significant factors are concentration, followed by time and liquid solid ratio. So all the 3 factors were significant. So again, hydrochloric acid was more effective than sulfuric acid. I will try to explain later why. The R-square of the model was good, and so yeah, this was the model for this type of ash. While for the Zurigo ash, we found this regression equation, which was the same for both acid. The most significant factors were concentration and liquid solid ratio, while this time time was not a significant factor. So type of acid and time are not significant factors in this case, and as you can see, if we want a phosphorus extraction efficiency between 80 and 100%, the acid requirements differ a lot between the 2 types of ashes. So to summarize the results of the task 2, we developed a predictive model for the calcium heavy ash. In that case, type of acid, concentration, liquid solid ratio, and time were significant factor, and hydrochloric acid was more effective than sulfuric acid. An explanation of this could be the co-precipitation of calcium sulfate, which is also known as gypsum, that limited the acid penetration towards the center of the grain of the matrix, which limited the release of phosphorus. So that's why we need more time to leach the same amount of phosphorus. The second model for the other ash tells us that only concentration and liquid solid are the significant factors, meaning that the release of phosphorus is a quick process. And we got the same efficiency with both acid we use. Now we can go to the last task. So the metal decontamination strategy. To do these experiments, we use the bottom ash from the flat grill technology. Why? Because in that plant, the wastewater collected were both municipal and industrial. So we have a higher contamination of zinc, copper, and chromium. We perform the phosphorus extraction, so we use sulfuric acid, and we got the leachate. So before doing the second phase, which is the precipitation, we use the nano sponges. So we tested different dosages, and we tested it at different pH. After the absorption tests that were conducted for 24 hours, we collected the filtrates and we started the second phase, which is the precipitation of phosphorus. So we increased the pH by using calcium hydroxide. Of course, the goal of this task is to produce precipitated material which is compliant with the fertilizer regulation. Here you can see some picture of the lab experiments we did. And as you can see, after the absorption test, the color of the sponges changes because at the start they were orange. And at the end, they change color. This is due to the type of metals they absorbed. So, for instance, the green one means that higher absorption of chromium was observed. Copper, sorry, was observed. These are some results of the absorption test. So, on the x-axis we have the pH, and on the y-axis we have the milligram of the heavy metals absorbed per gram of nanosponges. You can see the trend we have as we move from pH less than 2, which is the pH of the leachate, to pH 10. At pH 1.8, which is the pH of the leachate, we had a good absorption of chromium, which was present at high concentration in the ash. Similarly, for these other elements, at pH 1.8, which was the pH of the leachate, we had a good absorption of iron and aluminum. You may notice that we have also less than 20% of phosphorus that was absorbed by the nanosponges, meaning that that fraction of phosphorus is less in the process. So, we took the ashes, we performed the extraction, we used the nanosponges, and then we increased the pH. So, with these dosages, absorption at pH 1.8, 10 gram of nanosponges per liter of leachate, precipitation at pH 8, we got a product, the green line, which was compliant with the fertilizer regulation. While in the blank test, in which the nanosponges were not used, we have in all the pH tested a higher concentration of the sum of iron and aluminum in the product. That should be less than 10%. So this is the regulation for inorganic fertilizers. We decrease also a bit the concentration of the zinc and the copper, which are the most present elements in the ash and then also in the leachate. So to summarize these findings, the use of nanosponges allowed to reduce the heavy metals contamination in the final material. The sponges are environmental friendly because they came from agricultural waste or trees or cotton, so they are environmental friendly, less expensive than ion exchange resins, and less amount of sponges was used compared to the conventional adsorbent that have been tested in literature. So what? We came to the end, to the conclusion. From the first task, we understood how the type and configuration of wastewater treatment plant and incineration technology can affect the ashes composition and then the recovery process. We can have two different situations. So, for instance, in Switzerland, the idea is to produce the ash and process the ash directly after the production. because they can meet the phosphorus supply without the need of store the sludge for the ash for long term, while Germany and Italy will first produce the ash, store them in a temporary storage, and then extract the phosphorus from the ash in a second moment, let's say. So the idea is to optimize the recovery process to get a high quality fertilizer material, which is enriched not only with phosphorus but also with other nutrients like, for instance, magnesium and potassium. And at the end, there is also still research ongoing about the reuse of the acidic solid residue, because we have seen before that is 80% of the total mass we use for the recovery process, so it's a huge amount. The idea is to try to reuse it in the cement industry, or if not possible, to put it in a landfill for non-hazardous waste. In the next week, we will try to scale up the process. So we want to go from the lab scale to the pilot scale. So we will use the ashes from Zurigo, and we will perform the test with 5 kilograms of ash, which means that we need 50 liters of acid solution. So the idea was to do this scale up and try to define the key performance indicators to check if our findings are good or not. So thanks for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.